an editor by the name of Paul-Michel Thibault. When I married, he had made arrangements to buy and ship a half a dozen bottles of Laurent Perrier champagne to my mother's house, and she smuggled that across the border and brought it to my wedding. It was very good. He made sure that I opened a bottle while he was here. When a couple of years later my husband and I bought a house, he shopped online again and bought 2 bottles, had them lovely gift wrapped and shipped to the house. I opened with quite excitement at this, and it was 2 beautiful bottles of chandelier cleaner. The fact that our very modest high ranch bungalow in Aylmer across the river from Ottawa had no chandeliers was not a problem. I did, however, really appreciate the sterling silver coffee measuring cup, what do you call it, spoon, that I still have. It was also engraved, so it's absolutely lovely. People have made mention of Google, and Ron was my Google. Whenever I wanted to know anything at all, I would ask, and of course he would know. As has already been established, he knew everything, and he had an opinion on everything else because he read. He read late into the night, and I knew this because several years ago, thank you very much, Kelly moved to Ottawa, which was perfect because that meant that Ron came to Ottawa on a very regular basis, and I saw him much more often than I was seeing him, which was a couple of times a year. He came to Ottawa, he would stay with Kelly, and then he would come over to his country estate, which is what he called Aylmer, and spend time at our house, most of it outside, in the garage during the winter where he could smoke, or sitting under the gazebo on the deck during the summertime. And I'm fond of saying that, and I understand how this works because I am now in my 50s and I'm forgetting things, that he probably, Ron Haggart, probably would forget more in a month than I would ever learn in a lifetime. What I appreciate most about Haggart is not just his work as a mentor, as a journalist, and all of the fabulous things that he did in his lifetime. I also appreciate him as somebody who really loved life. He really did stop. He smelled the flowers. He also sniffed and sipped the scotch, the single malt scotch, of which we drank quite a bit. He savored the many raw oysters that he could get at one of our favorite Ottawa restaurants. He loved life. And I don't know, because I just flew in from Ottawa today. I arrived after the speeches started. I don't know if it's already been quoted about how what everyone knows is usually wrong. One of his favorite expressions, when you'd say to him, well, everybody knows, and he'd say, no, no, no. What everyone knows is usually wrong. This is the only way I'm going to get my last word with Ron Haggart, and that's to say that what everyone knows is usually wrong is not always the case, because what everybody here knows is that he was a remarkable man. He was a fabulous man. He loved us. We loved him, and we will never forget him. That's what we all know.
My name is Brian DeNike. It was announced earlier this evening by Paula that Ron won the prestigious Canadian Journalist for Free Expression Vox Libra Award. It's my pleasure to announce he has acquired yet another honor. This one is called the People Who Inspire Jasmine DeNike Award. You may have missed it, but my 18-year-old daughter, Jasmine, announced on her Facebook page the other day that Ron joins a list of people that inspire her. The list includes Emma Watson, Jack Layton, John Barrymore, William Shakespeare, Oscar Wilde, J.K. Rowling, and Michelle Obama. And then there's a few other names of people I don't know, and I don't think you would either. But I do know that I am not on that list. She claims her rules are that family members don't count. To which I replied, how come Uncle Ron made the list? It's an argument I know I won't win, but it does illustrate how close my family has been with Uncle Ron. I first met him at the Fifth Estate in 1977, and he met my wife Mary and Jasmine shortly after her birth in 1993 in London. Jasmine has known him as Uncle Ron her whole life, and he's been to our dinner table countless times. I'd like to tell you about one of those occasions. In 2002, Ron lived alone in his condo/townhouse on Spadina near Queen. And if you've had the opportunity to visit him there, you know he was surrounded by his hundreds of books, piles of newspapers and magazines that he subscribed to, his TV, every kitchen gadget invented, and his state-of-the-art electric typewriter. He would jump at any mention of the possibility of a meal prepared by anyone but himself, and the company of good friends, and of course, a good supply of scotch. We hadn't seen Ron for a few weeks, so we called to invite him for dinner. We found his answering machine was full, not accepting messages. This went on for a few days, and we were becoming quite worried until we found out his daughter Laura had also been very concerned, Laura and Kelly. Laura went to his condo, found him quite ill, and took him, under protest, to the hospital. Ron had come down with a serious disease called, and I hope I get this right, Wegener's granulomatosis. I think I can do better than that. It required extensive and delicate treatment and therapy, and he ended up in and out of the hospital, mostly in, for about 6 months. Near the end of this period, on one of my visits, Ron told me that he was going stir-crazy, and that since he'd been, in his words, a model prisoner, he thought we might arrange an evening parole for a home-cooked meal, some good company, and 1 or possibly 2 drinks of scotch. I told him I didn't think there was any chance this was going to happen, since he was barely able to get around with a cane. And he said, well, leave it with me. When I went back the next time, to no one's surprise, because we all know his powers of persuasion and negotiation, it was going to happen. It had been negotiated with the doctors and nurses, and after being warned by the doctors and nurses that Ron was my responsibility for the evening, I returned the next day, bundled him up, and drove him to my home. It was the year of the great snows in Toronto. You might remember there had been a fresh dump of snow in Toronto. Knowing that Ron was limited to what he called his old man shuffle, and that he would insist on wearing his leather-soled shoes, which provided the traction of skates, I had meticulously shoveled my walkway, and Ron, with his cane, successfully negotiated the walkway to my porch, with me hovering around, trying to grab his arm, and he kept telling me to stop fussing. From the walkway up to my porch is 1 step, about 6 inches. Ron told me he was fined when I tried to grab his arm, and if I wanted to do, or to be of any help, to go and get the door, which, not thinking too clearly, I did. As I reached the door, I turned and saw Ron put his cane and 1 foot up the 6-inch step and push himself upright. Well, not quite. I then watched in some horror as his smile of accomplishment changed to one of surprise, and stiff as a tree, with his arms raised to his side like branches, still holding his cane, he started to, in slow motion, fall backwards. I couldn't move, and I remember Ron saying as he went backwards, "Oh dear." I now know the meaning of the expression, "your life flashed before your eyes." Only it wasn't my life that flashed before my eyes. It was a bunch of questions like, how could I be so dumb to let this happen? How do I explain returning Ron to the hospital in a body cast? How do I explain this to Ron's family, who, as far as I know, knew nothing about this parole and thought he was safely tucked in his hospital bed? I watched him fall backwards and heard him utter the "oh dear," and he landed on his back in the freshly shoveled snow, having missed the concrete walkway by 6 inches. I stood on my porch, looked down at Ron, spread-eagled in the soft snow, wearing that hat, I think, by the way, and he calmly lay there and said, "Could you possibly help me up? I'm too old to be making angels in the snow." In total relief, I got him up, brushed off, got him inside to the kitchen table. Mary and Jasmine fussed over him as he reached for the bottle of Johnny Walker Green Label 15-year-old blended malt Scotch whiskey that we always brought out for his visits, poured himself a healthy shot, took a large sip, and said, "The good stuff." And now I got a bit of a confession to make here. Just before I left to pick Ron up at the hospital, I remembered to check my supply of Scotch. I'm not that much of a Scotch drinker, neither is my wife. So when I got out the bottle of Johnny Walker Green Label 15-year-old, et cetera, I found that it was in effect empty. In a bit of a panic, since the liquor stores were closed, I found way at the back a bottle of what can only be called a not very good run-of-the-mill Scotch. Yeah, you know what's coming. I took the cheap Scotch, poured it into the empty bottle with the good label, and when Ron was sipping away and raving about the nectar of the gods, my shame and humiliation was complete. I now ask his and your forgiveness for my sin of completely ruining Ron's lifelong reputation as a connoisseur of fine Scotch. I always intended to tell him, but it never seemed the right time, you know what I mean? And the more I thought about it, on the other hand, Ron probably knew right away it wasn't the good stuff. And like a true gentleman and friend, decided any Scotch was better than no Scotch at all. A small postscript, and then I'm done. As we left the house that evening, and each and every time he came over after that, Ron would stop at my front porch and say, "Ah, the Ron Haggart Memorial Step." He was a loving father to Kelly, Laura, and Carrie May, a truly great Canadian, a great journalist, a great man. And to Mary, Jasmine, and I, a wonderful friend. We really miss him. Thank you.
After Brian's confession and request for forgiveness, it seems appropriate that I'm the next speaker. My name is Brent Hawks, and I'm the senior pastor at the Metropolitan Community Church of Toronto. And I'm in awe of this moment. Having presided at many funerals and memorial services, I'm usually asked to do the churchy part when others have gotten up and paid tribute in their personal eulogies. I am in awe to hear your stories and your memories and to get to know Ron better for having been here and had the opportunity to listen to the eloquence and the wonderful, wonderful stories. I've been asked on behalf of the family to issue a few messages and then to share a few brief thoughts.